Some time. All right, I believe we're live. So, hello, wonderful FSAs from around the world. Welcome to the April's Office Hour. Today, we have with us Mike, who's going to share some information and insight on how you can contribute to Firefox. I'm Christos. I'm here as forgot to introduce myself, sorry. I'm Christos. I'm part of the participation team and the FSA contributor. So in the first part, we're going to have Mike introducing the contribution opportunities on Firefox. And on the second part, we're going to have some Q&A regarding the FSA and the CAPS campaign. So there is an Etherpad where you can find, where you can address all the questions to Mike and me, and you can also state your name and where are you from and how to connect with you. This is going to be recorded and for other FSAs to see later after this call. So, Mike, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you all for joining us. Well, good morning. Good time, wherever it is, whatever time zone you happen to be joining us in. First of all, I want to thank you all for your contributions and for your participation. We're deeply grateful for the efforts of the FSAs and everyone who's participating in that program. We really couldn't do it. Mozilla couldn't do what we can do without the community's help. And so I'm grateful to have all of you here listening to us and trying to help us get Firefox, make Firefox better and move the open web forward faster. Are there, I'm just following down in the Etherpad at the bottom there, about any questions we have and ongoing questions we have from anyone participating. Please feel free to interrupt us in the Etherpad just by raising a hand, I suppose, by typing it into the Etherpad. Or if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to run with it. There's a couple of things that I would like to talk about today, mostly about engineering engagement and contribution pathways for Firefox. I know a lot of you have contacted me already about the blog post that I wrote a few days ago about helping Firefox go faster. And that's the feedback that we've gotten from that has been really, really heartening. We've got a lot of people who have decided to take their first steps to help us triage bugs a little bit better and help us move things along a little bit faster there. And that's really been wonderful to see. I apologize. I'm laughing a bit here because right now all of our colleagues on this call have video muted. So right now I'm talking, I'm making this presentation to an image of myself talking. And so I've done this before, but it's always a little bit of an odd experience to be making your pitch to yourself while you're doing it, knowing that you're in front of dozens or hundreds of other people. So having said that, there's a lot of things. One of the things that we've tried to do recently is to get a lot more open about how people can participate in Firefox development, and to be a lot more accessible about all the different ways that you can help develop Firefox. One of the things that one of the things that is underappreciated about software development in the 21st century is that there's a lot more to it than just writing the code. That is the kind of the thing that everyone thinks it is, that they can only contribute to Firefox or they can only contribute to the development of any open source project by having a deep understanding of the software already and writing a whole bunch of things, writing a whole bunch of software to help it along, when in fact making a piece of software now takes an enormous amount of hugely different skills and hugely different levels of commitment in all kinds of different fields. We have localization, we have testing, we have bug triage. There's this entire world of things around a software project that are not in the core, not in what you might call the core code, but that are nevertheless really important to it and in fact critical to a project's success, particularly a project that has the size and scope of Firefox. We have documentation that needs to be maintained and updated. We have bugs that come in at a rate of hundreds a day that we need to understand and triage and make sure that they find the right home. There's localization efforts, all numbers of other things. And so one of the things that we're focusing on as an organization now is being really meticulous in sort of making people aware of all of these contribution avenues and making those contribution avenues accessible. I talk a lot about accessibility, and I get really worked up about it because, and if any of you have heard the term before, you've probably thought about accessibility in terms of things like Pardon me, there's a phone going on here. We're just going to let that one go. You've probably thought about accessibility in terms of, say, the buttons that will open a door automatically, or a ramp for somebody on an assisted mobility device. Great. Please hold the line for just a moment.
So for the FSAs that currently are watching us, feel free to join the Etherpad and write your name and address your question to Mike. And spread the word that we are live.
My apologies for that. That was my kids' school giving me a call. No, I'm sorry. I'm talking about accessibility. Let's try that again. One of the things that we talk about a lot is in terms of accessibility is, and you've probably thought of accessibility in terms of things like screen readers, in terms of things like ramps for people on wheelchairs, or the things that open the door for you if you are if you have a mobility challenge. And that's one way to think about it, and that's the most sort of common perspective of it. But another way to think of accessibility is in terms of complexity, specifically in terms of unnecessary complexity, right? A way to make a thing, the person who is going up to the door and pushing the button to help it open them, sometimes that's somebody in a wheelchair or with a cane, but more often than not, that's just somebody with a bag of groceries, someone who is going up the stairs with a child in a cart. It's someone who just wants the thing that they're trying to do to be easier in that moment when it's unnecessarily difficult. And making a code base or a project accessible has a lot to do with reducing that unnecessary complexity, of taking away all the things around the project that make participating in that project hard, but aren't necessarily going to advance the goals of that project at all. Like, Firefox is not very well served by making it difficult to get started developing, or making it difficult to figure out where a good first bug is, or making it difficult to figure out how to use Bugzilla. Those things are all problems that we try to work around and try to that we have in place because we haven't often thought about them very hard, but they're also problems that we present to new people who want to join, and that ends up causing people to leave the project without being able to make the contribution that in that moment they really want to make. So we've now been going down our list of engagement steps, like the list of things you have to do before you can make the contribution, and saying, okay, which ones of these are really necessary? How can we make this easier to do? How can we make this more fun and less painful? And there are some things there that still remain a challenge to this day. Bugzilla is, once you get to use Bugzilla, it's great, but Bugzilla is still harder to use than it needs to be. Getting set up to develop Firefox is now much, much easier than it has ever been, if that's your interest. And getting involved in our triage process, in trying to figure out where you can make a real impact in terms of sorting bugs and helping us organize bugs and making sure that bugs don't get lost, that's getting better really quickly as well. So if you're interested in helping Firefox, and if you are someone who's interested in writing software, who's interested in, even if you're someone who's a veteran who's interested in writing software and who's got a lot of experience with that, that's great, but you don't necessarily need to start there. One of the things that you can do is, one of the things that you can do then is, but just by signing up for a Bugzilla account, and by signing up for and figuring out how you can just watch a feature, or learning how to follow a feature along that you're interested in, just to get your feet wet, and to try and follow the evolution of a feature that you like, or some part of the project that is dear to your heart. A great way for people now to get to do that is to start with that, and then as you watch that sort of mail come in, as you watch the bugs get filed against that component, to try and figure out, okay, how can I make this bug a little bit better? How can I make one or two of these bugs a little bit more clear? And as people have started doing that in the last couple of weeks, as part of our Go Faster project, we've started to notice that people are adding a ton of like velocity, I guess for lack of a better term, and forward motion to bugs that otherwise wouldn't get a lot of attention because they're either, when they come in, they're badly written, or they're unclear, or they don't end up in the right component. And so it's impossible to overstate how much this kind of involvement, how much the sort of cleaning up the cluttered workspace around things, the cluttered workspace around our development environment, which is now full of bugs that may or may not be in good condition, may or may not be actionable directly, of having people sort of jump on those things and interact with them and take over the sort of cleanup of that environment and making things actionable helps everyone involved in the project just move really, really quickly and make efficient decisions about things. That kind of thing helps people make, it doesn't just help people make clear decisions, but it helps us make sure that we don't lose things, we don't get bugs lost. One of our ambitious goals for this project of getting people involved in triage is, and this is one of the, it's not, I don't think, written down anywhere, and it's not an official goal, but this is one of the things that we have as an aspirational goal, something we aspire to. You know, if everything goes fantastically well, this is what the result is going to be. And the result of that is going to be that there are what are called zero chem spills. A chem spill is when we have to rapidly respin a Firefox release because of a recently discovered bug that is of great enough severity that we have to protect our users from it. And if we can get to this point, it'll be lovely. But what we want is zero chem spills for previously filed bugs. And what that means is that we are going to be aspiring to know about and correctly evaluate all of the bugs that come in all the time. And that's a big, big thing to ask for a relatively small team of engineers as compared to anyone else who's making a web browser. Any other company that's making a web browser right now has essentially as many engineers as they feel like putting on it, and a budget of essentially infinity dollars because they work for Google or Apple or other places that have essentially a money spigot in the back of their office, for lack of a better term, that they can just turn the crank on and have another $100 million fall out of it. And it's wonderful. It's a good situation for them to be in. It presents us with a couple of important challenges. And the only way we're going to be able to answer those challenges is if we have our community help us with just making sure we don't miss anything, helping us make sure that we don't overlook anything, and that we're not losing ground because of the amount of participation, the amount of bugs that are coming in. So I went on about that at some length. I'm going to take a breath here for a moment. Is there something that, does anyone else have any questions at this point? Let me just read the Etherpad. Oh, yeah. That last one, the community is necessary, right. I really can't emphasize this enough, is the importance of the community to Mozilla and Mozilla's efforts, partly through the FSAs and partly through a number of other avenues. I'll ask you to hold the line one more time. Please forgive me. Hey, we're back. Sorry about that. My daughter is sick today, so she's staying home in school. Just wanted to make sure. And it's a parenting life.
Wishes for a good recovery then.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. She'll be glad to hear it. That last line in the Etherpad right now, the community is necessary towards the evolution of our product. Yeah, it really is. Like we've done some charts, and I can't emphasize this enough. The one thing that we have that nobody else making a web browser right now has in any kind of quantity or scale is our community. It's two things. It's the Mozilla Manifesto, which is this belief in a better future for an open web that belongs to everyone and that everyone can participate in, and thousands and thousands of people who really care about making that happen. And it's really just vitally important to us as an organization that we not only empower that community and help that community make really good decisions. Help that community, I said, make really valuable contributions and make sure that the community knows where our priorities are and that the community can sort of get engaged to the point where they help us shape and have a strong voice in our future priorities and our future decisions. And the only way that we're going to be able to get to that future is by making sure that Firefox has a really good engagement surface, and that the people who are involved in Firefox know that there's all these ways to contribute and there's all these ways to help make the web better, and that getting involved in that process and that being a part of Firefox, both the product and the development process and the larger community through FSAs and events and everything else, is a really sort of worthwhile and rewarding experience. So meetings all day. That's where we are. One of the interesting things that's coming up as part of the Firefox Go Faster project, which is also an engineering initiative to try and push features out to testers very early as we're developing the product, sort of try features out on a smaller subset of users and roll them out piecemeal. One of the is that the community is going to be involved in that as well. We're going to make it possible, my hope, and we're working towards that right now, is that we're going to make it possible to roll for our community members to build ideas and build features into the product in ways that use the same tools and have the same resources that our engineering staff has and that our release and build engineering staff has as well. I'm really excited about this because it means, well, to put this in perspective, one of the things that the industry as a whole has learned about software development in the last 10 or 15 years is that if you can do it at all, doing sort of major point releases, major version releases is not the right way to test a product. You can't just add a bunch of features into your product and then push it out to your entire user base, because what you're doing in many respects there is an uncontrolled experiment on your entire user base on whatever your release cycle happens to be. So we're doing, in the case of Firefox, like we release a new product every 6 weeks or so, and that means every time we push out a whole bunch of new features, we're pushing them out to everybody. Everyone gets them at once. We don't really have good data then about whether or not any of those features should be changed, should be clawed back. We don't really have great ways of analyzing the results of that process. So what we're hoping to do is to be able to roll out some of those features incrementally, right? A little bit at a time. We'll test something, roll it out to hundreds of users, and if that works well and we get good feedback from that, then we can roll it out to thousands of users, and eventually we're going to start treating the Firefox, the product, the way most people developing server-side software, the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, do that right now with incremental rollouts, gathering metrics, testing them, and then growing the rollout if that's a success and clawing it back if it's a failure and reevaluating. And one of the nice things about working at Mozilla is we want to do all of this in the open. We want to do all of this sort of up front, and we want to make it participatory as well. Kev Needham, Amy Tsay, and the add-ons team right now are doing amazing work in the add-ons environment, making it possible for people to write add-ons for the community, grow the product with new features and new directions like that. And that's only going to get more important as we start to roll out the Go Faster stuff and start to talk about how those two things are going to get more tightly integrated, how we're going to start making metrics available to people as much as we can. It's always a challenging balance for us to have available metrics to the public on one side, but also respect our user privacy and spending a lot of time caring about making sure users' data is secure, which is absolutely critical on the other side of things, because, well, protecting user data and respecting user privacy are absolutely critical to Mozilla's efforts, because perhaps obviously everyone who uses Firefox chooses to use it, right? Everyone who installs the product does so. Like, there are no default Firefox installs anywhere at the moment, and that's really unfortunate because but it's great for us because it means that everyone who uses Firefox decided to do that on purpose. The byproduct of that is that, our ability to affect change and our ability to change the market and move the market depends entirely on users' trust and users' willingness to trust us to that effect. And so maintaining that trust and maintaining the security of our product and the integrity of our users' data is of absolutely critical importance to us. I'm sorry, I'm ranting. I'm kind of going off on a series of tangents here, but I really do want to emphasize that we are engineering the organization now in such a way that it will be as participatory and as open as possible, while maintaining the high standard of personal user security that we prize and that we can't operate without. And I hope that you'll all be a part of it. I'm really flattered that I'm constantly astounded and humble at the amount of community effort that goes into building this product, and we really need to keep that alive because it's the one thing we do better than anyone else. All right.
Thank you very much, Michael. Mike, sorry.
That's all right.
And sorry, I'm trying to keep up. I was taking some highlights and notes, but unfortunately, I was able to keep them all, but only a couple of highlights. But the session is recorded, so it would be great for other FSAs to watch it afterwards.
Well, I ramble a fair bit, so I hope that any of that made any sense to you, or anyone.
Definitely make any sense. And I think it's one of the most inspiring session I have until now, especially with someone from the Firefox team, which unfortunately, I don't know why, because I'm from the FSA community as well, we don't see you a lot,
I will do this twice a month if you like. I would be happy to come back and talk at any length you like about what we're working on and how people can get involved. And it's a great privilege for me to be here.
And it's a great privilege for us because we have more insights about how the team is working, about priorities, about the new structure of your work and the upcoming feature policy. And speaking of features, there is a question from Khalid from Bangladesh, who would like to learn more about the Firefox developer tools nightly builds, and especially some of the features that are growing there.
The Firefox, the DevTools nightly builds. I will have to go and look that up. There's a number of interesting things happening in the DevTools space. We have a couple of different things going on that are really either a little bit interesting or extremely interesting going on in the DevTools space. And so I would be happy to come back. In fact, why don't, instead of trying to answer that question now, why don't I go and do a little bit of research and come back and talk again in this forum in about the next time we have this call, and run it again then. I'd be happy to tell you everything I can find, everything that is going on in the DevTools space, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff coming along there. There's just in the last couple of months, we've seen the DevTools stuff increase in small ways and in much more interesting ways. And so I'll come back in, say, a week. Or when's the next call? Is it a monthly call or a weekly call?
This is a
monthly.
This is a monthly call. Yeah, unfortunately, monthly call. But if we see participation, we can make it every 2 weeks. We'll see about that.
Okay, let's start with a monthly call. Why don't I commit to doing that right now? I will come back in the next monthly call, and I'll talk about DevTools and what's going on in that space.
That's great. That's great because most of us are really geeky and always want to have cutting edge tools, especially with developers. So that's great. All right. So let me try to recap a couple of things that you highlighted. First of all, in order to contribute to the Firefox product and or any other relevant software tools, you don't need to have deep knowledge of programming, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and there are a lot of ways to contribute, like documentation, back triage, QA, and localization. Regarding back triage, I think that's a really great way to start contributing. Is there any easy entrance point? I mean, following your favorite feature it's great, and start working on it. But anything else that you recommend?
So the QA team. The QA team is always interested in having people test or verify bugs. They keep lists of things that can you test this bug on this platform if you happen to have it. The localization team is particularly strong, and they've got a lot of good people who are always looking for volunteers as well. Documentation, and there's a number of other people engaged in the let's see. apart from that, right now, if you're interested in the graphic design or design area, we have as well a creative team that is, there's a growing design community around Firefox as well. So there's a growing bunch of graphic designers and graphic artists who are getting involved in, and that's shaping up on GitHub. Let me see if I can find that.
Yes, we had the community design group in our last call.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and in
was,
that case, you're well ahead of the curve there, so you know what's up there. Yep.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. And like you say, discoverability is a problem. Discoverability of how to get into some particular point is an ongoing challenge for us. The Android team, if you happen to have an Android device and you want to be a beta tester of our products, even like just installing Firefox for Android, the beta version, which you can get from the Google Store, just testing that and running that helps us out enormously as well. Living in, the simplest thing I think that people can do is to download a pre-release version of our product, of any of our products, in fact, and just live in that for a little while. Live in Firefox for Android. Live in Firefox for Android beta. The phone again. Forgive me for one more moment, please. I apologize.
Sure. For the people who just joined the call, I would like to say that this is this call is recorded, so you will be able to watch it again from the beginning after the end of the call on YouTube. So you would be able to see what Mike shared with us about how to contribute in Firefox, and it's way more easy to contribute other than you have thought. You don't need to have any particular programming skills, and how the community is important in the growth and the continuous evolution of our products in Mozilla, because this is a key, because it is a key for the Mozilla company, and this is something that other companies with similar products don't have.
My apologies again.
It's okay. It's okay.
So let's go. Let me take a look at some of the other questions that are here. I'm sorry I had you muted while I was on that other call. Let me just take a look, and I will schedule a better meeting time for this next time so that I have absolutely
it's okay.
have my undivided attention.
It's okay.
All right. So the developer tools question from Khalid. Hello, Khalid. I'm glad you're watching this. I will come back to the next call with much more information there. And I will actually, why don't I just try to put a small presentation together on the developer tools and what the state of that part of the organization is and what they're working on. They are very glad to have contributors, and they're a very welcoming corner of the organization. If you find, if you're already invested in development around Firefox, one of the things that or building Firefox proper, one of the things that the developer tools team does is they surface a lot of good first bugs and a lot of good places for people to start getting involved in the project. And I'll have more to say about that. And you can feel free to email me directly about that as well. Let me just add my own email.
Yeah, please do. While you're adding your email address, there is an interesting question about how to help the community and as a programmer and how the projects are coordinated with each other. I mean, Eduardo from Italy says that see the information on the wiki page, but he wants to know more if the wiki pages are updated, when it's changed, and some of the things in wiki you already know that maybe they're updated. So what's the best way to follow up the projects and keep updated? And
so there's two things. One of the wiki tools that are available is that you can follow a wiki page. And following a wiki page is not a perfect solution, but it will email you whenever a wiki page changes substantially, and that's okay. It's imperfect, but it's okay. And that will at least give you a sense of when activity is happening on a page and when things change. That's a reasonably good way of keeping up. We don't have, unfortunately, we have a lot of very sort of disparate ways where development decisions get made. Sometimes they get made in bugs, sometimes blog posts happen, sometimes they get posted to news groups, and other times the wiki gets updated. We're still kind of all over the place there, and that has long been considered. It's a daunting thing for a new contributor or a new participant to be able to follow all of this stuff. The best thing to do is probably to find the 2 to 4 wiki pages that are about the project you're interested in, and make sure that you add yourself to a following list there. And that way you'll get a notification in your email when the documentation changes substantially. There's a little delay between when the change actually happens and when the documentation gets updated, and that's unfortunate. But that's sort of the easy first step. Following on after that, the next steps after that involve following mailing lists, following Planet Mozilla, or the developers who are in, or some of the developers who are involved in your particular domain of interest. And unfortunately, it takes a much more sort of a much sort of greater investment of time to stay on top of what's happening on a day-to-day basis. We're hoping to improve our product release notes in the next couple of product releases to tell us a little bit, to make sure that people can see through those release notes a little bit more about what's going on and a little bit more about the story and decision making behind them. But that's a project that is months down the road, unfortunately. Let's see.
And just a note here, I think the Mozilla Planet, is a really good way to start following projects and not only projects but other interesting stuff around technology in Mozilla, because you see how the developers express themselves, cool new features, projects, initiatives, and you keep updated on important stuff.
It's a great but very sort of bursty way of keeping track of things. One of the things that we strongly recommend, I happen to be a Planet peer, oddly enough, and so I love it. I think it's a great resource, but still has a lot of room to grow. One of the things that I do recommend is if you intend to follow Planet for any length of time, you should probably use a feed reader of some kind. Like, get a program whose job is to follow RSS feeds and whose job is to organize that for you. It'll be a much better and more understandable experience than just refreshing the Planet web page, because if you follow Planet by refreshing the Planet page, you'll be dealing with an avalanche that you won't be able to surf on top of, and there's just a lot there, and there's no telling how fast or how often things will come in. So get a program that does that for you, because otherwise you'll be underwater forever. Let's see. All right, so we've got some other interesting questions here. The questions about how to contribute to the Firefox community as a very beginner. That's a very large question. How to contribute to the community as a very beginner? Probably the easiest way to go is to find out from the reps in your region. I'd start in 2 ways of doing it. First of all is figuring out what the reps in your region are and getting in touch with them. The Mozilla reps are an incredibly valuable group of people to Mozilla, and they do incredible work. And we don't spend enough time at Mozilla talking to them and listening very carefully to what the answers are. But they are a very important group of people who do really critical work for Mozilla as a mission. And so get in touch. You can go to reps.mozilla.org, find the community members in your region, and just reach out to them. They're on that site because they want to be contacted, and they're excited to be a part of, they're excited to do the community building and engagement stuff. After that, they should be those people are generally good tour guides for that part of the organization. Beyond that, using nightly, the usual things, using stuff, using some feature, filing bugs. Engineers love people who file bugs. And filing good bugs, I should say. If you find an issue that is a specific problem, we have a fairly good idea. Like, a good bug means that we understand that we're on nightly and that we've, live in Nightly, which is great. You're on Nightly. You've got a clear description of what the bug is and what you expected the bug would do instead of what the problem was. And these can be bugs at any level. They can be feature requests, everything from a new feature request to a crashing bug. But let us know. Like, we have posters around our offices now that have a big picture of the bug on it that says, if you see something, file something, right? And so if you see a problem with our product, please let us know. If you're living in beta, Firefox beta for Android, or if you're living in Aurora, or pardon me, Developer Edition or Nightly, and you see a problem with the product, tell us. That helps us make better decisions. It helps us make a safer, smarter product for the hundreds of millions of people using it. And so, yeah. So those are sort of your baby steps. Is get in touch with the reps in your region, and live in our pre-release products for a while. That's an interesting first step too. Some of our strongest contributors are people who started out using our Nightly products, and then they started out filing some bugs, and then they started out and then they got from there to watching some components or watching a number of components, trying to understand how the product and the Bugzilla culture and the the culture of how Bugzilla is used, and then how the culture of development occurs, and learning slowly about how that process comes along. And eventually some of the people who've sort of stuck with that and gone through that process have grown up to be some of the great leaders of our project. The last owner of the Firefox product, the last module owner, before he moved on just recently, started out life as a high school student who just decided to copy himself or CC himself on all the bugs that came in. One day, he just decided he was going to fill his inbox with all the bugs, and so he did that for a few years. And after a few years, he was absolutely critical to us getting anything organized and getting our bugs triaged. And shortly after that, he was, essentially the owner of the product, because he knew where all of the things were and how all those parts were moving better than anyone else. And that's not an uncommon story, right? People grow out of the community and into very powerful roles here at Mozilla. They grow out of Mozilla, the community, into roles at Mozilla, the company, and Mozilla, the organization, because after a while, people who have that kind of depth of understanding of the product, or of some component of the product, or of the the underlying technology, or the state of the project in some holistic sense, become indispensable to the project. Not indispensable. Everyone likes to think they're indispensable, but become very, very valuable, to the point where we just can't afford to have them spending time on things that aren't Mozilla. So there we are. Right? So let's see, what else do we have here? Let's see. Contribute to Mozilla. We've got some other questions. How are the projects coordinated? That's a wow. That's a hard question. It's like, kind of. The projects are kind of coordinated is often the story there. How do we keep the projects coordinated? We're getting better at that. But some of the time the answer is poorly. They're poorly coordinated. Other times they're coordinated. And in truth, I'm not sure what you mean by coordinated. We have a lot of people working on a lot of different projects at this point, and coordinated can mean a couple of different things. It can mean coordinating for release dates. It can mean making sure that we're not duplicating effort. It can mean a bunch of other things. And a lot of that relies on frequent but informal communication between managers and between projects at a very low level in the organization. Just, we have a great deal of trust in our upper leadership and management to be setting the right direction for the organization, to be assigning resources and pointing us in, pointing the organization towards the promised land of the future. But we also, in order for us to be effective operationally, we also have a lot of low-level communication between managers, between directors and teams, just to make sure that while we have that overall vision for the future lined up, and while we're all sort of roughly moving in the same direction, that we're also pulling, we're also not stepping on each other's toes. And sometimes we do step on each other's toes, and sometimes we just have teams that have the conviction that what they're doing is absolutely right. And even though it looks kind of like this thing this other team is doing, that they are also convinced of its correctness. And so there's tension where projects just seem to be pulling in the same direction, and that's actually okay. Because we can afford to be experimental, and we can afford to do some interesting things that don't look like they make sense in the near term. But if someone who has a history of creating successful projects or products can drive, goes to management and says, "I'm convinced that I'm right about this," a lot of people will be given a lot of leeway to try and experiment with that. Not all the time, but and not, it's not a perfect system, but we prize the fact that we've got a system that is open enough and participatory enough, not just from an engineering standpoint, but from a community standpoint and from a number of other axes to say that, okay, we can try and experiment here. And because that to the outside looks often like chaos, we often have to do a little bit of work to, we have to do a lot more work on messaging and communication than I suspect many companies do. But we think it's worth it because have you ever heard of something called Conway's Law? So Conway's Law is this idea that a software product is going to end up resembling the org chart of the company that made it. So that if you've got if you've got say if you've got a 4-team or if you've got 5 teams working on a compiler, for whatever reason, then you're going to end up with a 5-pass compiler because the software is going to come to reflect the communication structure of the organization because people have to communicate to make software, and so the API structure is going to end up looking like your Office phone book and whatever. It's an interesting sort of sociological phenomenon. A lot of people think it's kind of a curse because it means that we can only make software in a way that is structurally, similar to the organization it comes from, and it's hard to change people, so the software becomes hard to change. But the other part of that is that, and one of the things that I think Mozilla actually does very well, is that we are trying to build a web that is big and flexible and messy and complicated. And I think that we all kind of understand as an organization that if we're going to do that, we're going to have an organization that is kind of big and kind of messy and kind of complicated and trying a lot of interesting things, some of which fail, and some of which turn into the interesting future projects. Other things turn into nothing. But if we're going to build an organization, if we're going to build a web that is big and messy and participatory and fun, then we're going to have an organization that is big and participatory and complicated and messy and fun. I think that we're doing that pretty well. It makes a lot of things harder than they have to be, but it also lets us build a lot of things that are more interesting and more fun than maybe they would otherwise have been. So that went on for a long time. If you let me start talking about things, I will generally talk. That's why they keep me around, is because I get excited.
Basically, I really enjoy this call. That's why I'm not interrupting or.
Thank you very much.
I enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. An existing official project of Raspberry Pi Firefox. So there's a couple of questions here about Firefox OS. I will have to go back and speak to those as well. I know that there were some ideas rattling around about a Raspberry Pi Firefox OS thing. I don't know where those are. The advantages of Firefox over other OSs right now. The Firefox OS team has mostly focusing on embedded devices now, so I'm going to have to, and embedded projects. I'm going to have to go and do a little research before I speak to anything that the Firefox OS group is doing, the Connected Devices group, I should say, is doing right now. I think they have a lot of interesting challenges ahead of them, and they've got a number of problems. They've got a number of problems exist in that space that I think that the Mozilla Manifesto can speak to very effectively. The ideas of the value of people's personal security and personal agency are all very important to me in this connected Internet of Things space, and I think that we're at a very interesting time in the development of that part of the the technology community. An example that I bring back a lot is that if you look at very old newspapers, you'll be able to see the time when electricity started to become a thing in the world, like in the 1800s, because people would start putting electricity in everything. Like, and some of the times that was great, like electric stoves instead of wood stoves. Like, why would you want an electric stove when you've got a perfectly good wood stove? But it turns out electric stoves are pretty great. On the other hand, they were also trying things like electric baby carriages. Like, why would you put electricity in a baby carriage? Who knows? But we're going to try it because we've got electricity and we've got baby carriages, and maybe there's something interesting there. There was not something interesting there. And we learned that lesson, I guess, the hard way. But we also learned that lesson 1,000 different places where we figured out, okay, you can do this with electricity. You can't do that with it. This is safe. That is dumb. We're not going to do that. The same thing happened later on. Same thing happened much later on with radiation, with radioactive materials, right? People would be on the one hand, fusion reactions, great, controlled fusion reactions, or fission reactions. If we can get nuclear power is pretty good. X-rays are fantastic. Radium water as a medicinal thing was a real thing. Like, you could get water infused with radium as a medicinal thing because someone thought that was a good idea. That turned out not to be a very good idea. People for a time were painting their fingernails with the same kind of glow-in-the-dark radium paint that people would use to decorate instrument dials, and that turned out to be an extraordinarily bad idea too. But there's all this experiment. Like, we didn't know that those things were good or bad ideas until we tried them. And right now we're at a point where we're starting to put network connections and CPUs into things, right? And there's an enormous amount of experimentation going on right now. And a lot of it is insane. Like, people are putting CPUs into mattresses, and people are putting processors and Wi-Fi connections into juice-making machines, which is, on the one hand, like, maybe there's something there, but on the other hand, there's just all this stuff that at first glance seems insane. Like, why would you ever do that? But at first glance looks insane, but we're going to find out that it's not. Like, people are starting to put CPUs into things like clothing, t-shirts and pants. Like, why would you need a processor in your pants as a thing, like measuring your pants? You're right. See, you're laughing. That at first hand, okay, I have e-pants now, and that's on the first hand, on the first glance, that's insane and dumb, and you don't need that, right? But on the second thing, when you consider that there's a possible niche market for it, one of the things is that, let's say that you're doing physical therapy, right? So it may be that there is somebody who is doing rehabilitative therapy, or somebody who is has a mobility challenge, or someone who's recuperating from an injury, and we want to be able to follow that person's actions, make sure that their posture is improving, make sure, like, have a record of how their ability to move is improving over time, or keep track of it. So right now we're in a really exciting time where we can make the case for some things that are crazy. We're just experimenting with all kinds of things, and I hope that Firefox, the embedded devices team in Firefox OS, what I really hope is that the Mozilla Manifesto plays an important role in the way that future shapes up, right? Because we have a lot to say, I think, about the importance of user agency in that space, of the importance of being able to understand what's being done with your data and to have that treated with respect and care. So that's my hope, is that there's going to be a lot more interesting stuff going on there. I'll have more to say about that in our next meeting in a month, and I'm looking forward to it. I'll do some research, figure out where the State of the Union there is. But this is, but it's a really exciting time. And if any of you want to get involved in if any of you want to get into a field right now where there's just a lot of unplowed ground and a lot of things waiting to be discovered, the embedded devices and Internet of Things space is it's a really fertile area right now. And the combination of that and things like software bots and a number of other things are really, anyway, there's a lot to get excited about right now, and there's a lot of room left to build things that are exciting. Right now we have a couple of organizations, like we have Google, and I grew up at a time when Microsoft was the 800-pound gorilla of anything, and it was huge and terrifying. And there was just, because the space in which their technology existed was completely controlled. You had the IBM was the old giant, where the giant of one section of computing, mainframes and enterprise systems, and then you had Microsoft, which was on the desktop, which is what all the computing was for a while. Monstrous, right, and terrifying. And now they're sort of mostly irrelevant. Like, they're big, and they're still a big organization, and they still got this powerhouse research arm, but they're not really doing anything that changes the way the future is going to look. But right now, for a lot of us, Google is that sort of monster. There's Apple and Google and Facebook are sort of the three big organizations right now. Amazon is interesting, but hard to say how that's going to turn out. Amazon's kind of an infrastructure company. But those are the big giants right now, right? They control the Android operating system. Facebook is the dominant social network by a wide margin over the nearest competitors. Apple has a massive hardware impact on hardware design, and an ability to turn supply. Their ability to master their supply chain is astounding. But they are not like. But this is not destiny, right? Like, we've seen, like, even in my lifetime, we've seen 2 generations of what looked like unstoppable giants fall or get pushed to the wayside because something coming out of the left field, they didn't have something on their radar that came out of left field that wasn't important to them, that looked like it was not going to be in a market they were interested in. And suddenly that is the market that everyone else is interested in, and they're irrelevant. It's like, how many mainframes get sold every year these days? The answer is probably who cares, right? Like, nobody on this call is going to make a life decision based on whether or not a mainframe has a feature or does something. And I would venture a guess to say that almost nobody in the world ever will. Desktop PCs are not going away. It's good to have a lot of CPU and some port and some screen handy by, right? But they're also, like, they're kind of in a stable state. We all know what a desktop PC is. It's not going to change. Like, people are upgrading to Windows 10. Windows 10 is becoming a service, and that's going to be your standard PC going forward, and that's that. But embedded devices, like all this Arduino stuff that's frothing around on the sidelines, all of these, like the fact that a Raspberry Pi is like $35 or something, right? And you can put you can buy as a hobbyist a $20 fully functioning CPU that you can put into anything for $15 or less. There's a lot coming here, and there's a lot of stuff to get excited about. And I want Mozilla, like, even if it's not Firefox OS, I want Mozilla's mission and values to be a part of that. Because I feel strongly that if we can't see into these computers, like these computers we delegate our responsibilities to, right? We delegate the decisions about how we spend our time and effort. We delegate a ton of those decisions to computers now. And if we can't look into those things and trust that they're working for us and not for someone else, and really understand what they're doing, then we're giving up a lot of control and a lot of agency over our fates, for lack of a better term. So I have a lot of strong feelings about the subject, and I hope that you do too. But this is, I mean, there's really never been a better time to get invested in technology and the way technology is going to shape our future than now. The tools have never been better. They've never been cheaper. They've never been more accessible. They're going to get better, and my hope is that as a result, if enough people keep building neat things and pushing on this, that the future will not belong to anyone, right? The future will not be somebody's property, and I think that's going to matter a lot.
Let me add to that, especially for Mozilla and the connected devices team. We're currently working closely as a participation with the connected devices team in order to identify participation opportunities for the whole community of volunteers at Mozilla, because, like you said, it's an exciting field. It's the future, but still we need to find we need to explore this area because it's really new to us. So we're going to do it together, community and Mozilla, and that's the future.
So the participation, like participation in via the participation team. But like participation in this embedded devices stuff is really, like I talked earlier about how important the reps are and how important that group of people is. But one of the things that we have, in fact, some of our great failures as an organization of Mozilla has come from, I mean, indirectly from essentially not paying enough attention to the reps and what the reps have to say about what life on the ground in their communities looks like. Because your idea of what technology matters and how people interact with technology in your home country, in your home culture, is going to look very different from mine, right? And it's going to be utterly different for me. So if I'm the one making decisions about technology and about the shape of the technology and how people engage with it, and then I go and I give that to you and say, there, it's done, then that product's going to fail in your market, and it's going to fail probably in mine as well ultimately, because that kind of hubris is toxic. But having the reps, like talking to the reps about what we're doing, talking to our community about what we're doing, and using that feedback to develop our products means that we're going to hopefully be developing products that will matter to people and that will matter to a lot more people. Like it's trivially easy for me as a white dude located in North America to make grand pronouncements about what the way the future looks like is. But what my pronouncements about the future of technology aren't going to have any relevance at all to people who are living in Africa, in radically different conditions, in Europe because of cultural difference, in Asia where social priorities are very different, in South America just because people interact with technology different in different places. And if Mozilla, I mean, George Roeder and his participation team are doing amazing work here in sort of deeply understanding that the world is a big place. And if we're going to be a global organization, we better be able to not only speak meaningfully to, but really listen carefully to people all over the world. And have those people not just be able to sort of answer questions and be like test subjects, but to really get their hands into the material and to get their hands on the work and shape and mold the work and the projects to their own ends. So it's important.
It's extremely easy. And speaking of questions, I would like to share with all the FSAs that regarding the general questions on how can I contribute to Mozilla and Firefox, I will follow up with this with the recap of this meeting, with the meeting notes and the video when it's going to after the meeting. So you're sure that we're going to answer all of your questions. We're on our time, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank you very much, Mike, for joining us. It was totally inspiring for me, and I believe for the rest of the FSAs who's out there watching us. And we're waiting for you next month, probably.
I'm looking forward to it. Listen, thank you very much for all of your time. I'm really grateful to be a part of this, and Mozilla could be what it is without you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.